We should probably go over like a normal needle sewing too. It's not as elegant. I don't like it, but there's certain areas where you just can't get in there any other way. So make sure you have a big fat leather sewing needle still, because the small ones are just not going to cut it. They're going to bend. It's too hard to get the right thread in there. So make sure you have like a big leather rated needle. I don't actually like to tie it because that knot is going to catch in the leather most of the time. So what I do is just leave some slack, a decent amount of slack, and as you're pulling it, the pressure is going to be on both sides, so it's not really going to like pull it out. You just have to keep an eye on it and then adjust it over time. It helps to have a thimble for these because it can be hard to push these through. That's what the handle and that other one is for. I don't know where mine's at right now. I don't think I need it for the example anyway. So starting with your hole. Let's see if I can find a good hole here. Just run it through, and then I think it's depending, you can either run it through and tie it at the end and then loop back through, or you can tie it over. I don't really like tying them over the edge, because as soon as enough friction, you know, of wear damages that, the whole thing's coming undone. So I think generally it's better to run it through the second hole. See here, and then just tie it there the same way you would tie like at the end of the other type of sewing. I'm just gonna shoe tie it because it's just for example. Obviously you want a more permanent type of sewing knot. So once you got it tied, you can decide if you probably just loop back through or loop over to the next one. And through. Depending on how you want to do it, it's going to look different than the other sewing, which is why this probably isn't as common sewing in this way. Because it's not like fabric where it bends when you sew it to go back and forth through it. It's going to leave, you know, gaps between each side of the hole, where you see it just looping through one side and then cross to the other side. This looks better if the holes are small, and generally if you're sewing with this type of needle, it should be small anyway. It would be small, but it's still noticeable, and it looks not so great on leather in my opinion. But another way that you can kind of remedy that if you don't like the look of that is when you get to the end of that line is to go back through, and in this case you probably do want a larger hole so you're not struggling to get past the thread that's already there. Loop back through on the other side, going in the reverse loop, and then that's going to cover the other edge and make it look more even. Doesn't really need to, but if you want it to look like more whatever, you can, and it will definitely be stronger for sure. Like any of these threads, any of these sewing areas, it's going to be under a lot of stress, like a wallet. You definitely want to either do it the other way with the handled needle or double back through so that you can get all the holes covered. And then I don't like to sew the entire piece with one thread, because obviously if it breaks, and they often do over time, the whole thing can come undone eventually. So it's better to do either a section or maybe the whole side, cut it, sew it, and then start another side. That way you don't risk the entire thing failing at once, and it's a lot easier to repair later. And then when you get back to the end, again, this is probably something there's different ways you can, different knots, you know, but if you're not, I usually just do something simple, just like loop through the one next to it and do a few knots, and same thing, use the lighter and flatten it out, and you're done. Pretty secure. Once you're done sewing, you might want to have like a fancy clean edge. Right now it's, you know, see it's rough, it's kind of uncut. This isn't tight, so it's not going to be like ideal for this, but I want to use something that's already sewn together. So you should have a tool like this. I think it's called a burnishing tool or something, and it's basically just gonna like wear down the edges to like smooth them out together. A lot of people like to use leather glue in here on the corners to like really hold it together, but I don't. It's, you know, it's up to you. it's if it's tight, it's doesn't really matter that much, and it's gonna wear out eventually. So find the groove that most closely fits the amount. Bigger's, try starting bigger to wear the edges down more smoothly before trying to force it into a smaller gap. And then just kind of go back and forth with the wood. Once it'll warm up a little bit and start to like smooth it out. Just, you can try rolling it. It's easy to just kind of go back and forth like you're sanding it. You can see it's starting to smooth those corners out a little bit. And then I can get it into a smaller one. Same thing. Even you might even want to try the biggest one to really get the edges here so they're not fluffing up.